Welcome to our short presentation today, where we're going to be looking at what businesses can do to support employees that are experiencing domestic abuse. My name is David Naylor, and I'm the Area Manager for Victim Support in Kent, and I'll be co-presenting with Lee Joyce, who is the Localities Manager for Clarion Housing Group. During the talk, we're going to look at what actually domestic abuse is and define it under law. We're going to talk about the signs that you should look out for people that could be experiencing domestic abuse, and then also how you can make some really small changes that will make a very big difference to people who are experiencing DA.
On the screen, you can see the current government definition of domestic abuse. This is any incident or pattern of incidents of controlling, coercive or threatening behaviour, violence or abuse between those aged 16 or over who are or have been intimate partners or family members, regardless of gender or sexuality.
It's really important to note the word current on that slide though, because there is a bill that's going through Parliament right now in relation to domestic abuse, and we expect that it will, for the very first time, create a cross-government statutory definition of domestic abuse. We think that the change will state that the abuser and the abused must be personally connected and aged 16 years or older at the time of the incident. And also, for the very first time, economic abuse will be included within the definition of domestic abuse. Oftentimes, domestic abuse is portrayed in the media or seen by most people as being a physical act, so something like a slap, but that isn't the case for everybody.
As you can see from the screen, we've outlined a number of different types of abuse. As David mentioned, there's physical abuse, punching, kicking, slapping, pushing people, basically assaulting an individual. Then there's psychological abuse. So this is about insulting, the perpetrator insulting the victim, manipulating them, calling them names, making them feel worthless. There's emotional abuse, isolating somebody from friends and family and the people they love. The perpetrator neglecting the emotional needs of the victim, shaming the person in public, for instance, as well. We've got financial abuse, so the perpetrator could keep the victim short of money, maybe expect that their salary is paid into a bank account only he or she has access to, not giving somebody enough money to be able to go and do the shopping for the family, for instance, and actually threatening them with some sort of violence if they don't actually manage the finances well. Controlling and coercive behaviour. This is about making threats and setting rules and regulations for a victim to live by. It erodes someone's confidence and self-esteem. The rules don't apply to the perpetrator, obviously, but actually the victim lives in fear of the consequences of breaking any rules. You've then got honour-based abuse, female genital mutilation and forced marriage. Honour-based violence is violence that can occur when perpetrators perceive that a relative has shamed the family or the community, and abuse can take a number of forms. Some examples are common assault, abduction, forced marriage, rape or forced imprisonment. And finally, there's sexual abuse, which is rape and sexual assault. There are often outward signs that someone is experiencing domestic abuse. And as an employer or work colleague, it could be that you can spot some of these. Has there been a change in someone's job performance? Are they perhaps not doing as well as they have done previously? Are they absent from work on sick leave more often than they have been? Do they receive significant numbers of texts or phone calls at work which appear to upset them or cause them distress? Have they had unexpected visits by their partner or a family member at the workplace? Do they come back from those conversations upset or worried in any way? Are they wearing inappropriate clothing if it's a warm sunny day and you'd expect them to wear short sleeves? Are they covered up with high necklines and long sleeves? Do they wear sunglasses when it's raining? Do they have any obvious injuries which they struggle to explain when perhaps you inquire if they're okay?
It could be that suddenly your team member is demonstrating emotional flatness, or it could be that they're withdrawing from contact with their colleagues. If somebody has been a really key team player in the past, they no longer want to be involved. That's another possible sign. It might be that they don't have access to money and resources, which could be unusual seeing as they are in paid employment. There is sensitivity around their home life, and they could make some vague comments around conflict at home. That could include bad moods, anger, temper swings from their partner, but also things like substance use or misuse. But although we've given you a list of signs, just keep your eye out for a pattern of unusual behaviour. And remember that domestic abuse impacts people regardless of their age, their gender, their ethnicity, their religion, their sexuality, or their gender identity. Chances are your life is busy enough already. In the last slide, we looked at why should employers respond to DA, whereas now we're going to look at why employers should respond to DA. Employers can provide a unique environment and culture that encourages people to disclose DA safely and reduces the immediate risk to them and any family members involved in DA. Employers can help to reduce the silence around this subject. In the previous slide, we talked about the impact on the people that receive the disclosure, and 1 in 10 who experience intimate partner violence will tell a work colleague. This is a really unique opportunity for that individual to be able to reach out for help. It may be that it's the only time that they can tell anyone, or in fact their colleague is the only person that they can tell as they're isolated from everyone else. It really is key that employers create the environment for this disclosure to be safely managed. And then finally, we think that you should be really proud of your work on this subject and shout about it. Let it show how this makes you be a forward-thinking and safe employer.
So in our previous slides, we've talked a lot about domestic abuse, what it might look like, and what the financial cost and impact can be, both for companies and for individuals. So what about the first steps an employer can take? Create a supportive workplace culture that actually encourages the identification of all sorts of health and wellbeing needs, including domestic abuse. And this will help break the silence around this issue. Acknowledge the reality of what may already be happening to your staff. And in order to ensure that disclosures are managed safely, create a policy around domestic abuse and educate and train your staff and managers to safely support their team and individuals. It's crucial that people are given every opportunity to make a disclosure and to feel that their workplace and their employer and colleagues will support them and help them to stay safe. As the slide says, you can achieve a lot with a few simple steps. It's important to understand that within all workforces there will be people today who are enduring domestic abuse and who see their workplace as a place of safety which provides them with an opportunity to access support and to get some specialist help. It's important to develop policies and procedures that create a safe space for employees to disclose and which prioritise the safety of them and their families. It's also important to provide additional support to managers handling disclosures. Sometimes, more often than not, these are difficult things to hear, and it's important that we look after not only the individual disclosing abuse, but the people who are trying to support them.
We've been talking about domestic abuse policies, but please don't look at those in isolation. Ensure that any associated policy, such as flexible working, is fit for purpose, but also logically ties into the DA policy. Ensure that both your internal and any outsourced HR teams have the knowledge and skills to support employees and those same knowledge and skills to make the fundamental changes needed to make the workplace safe. And finally, keep in touch with your employees. Contact the police if you are unexpectedly unable to contact them. So after all that, we are coming towards the end of our presentation. We've given you quite a lot of information, so we thought it wise just to break it down to some really small little bits of information that you can focus on. The first one is simply to keep your staff safe. In an emergency and where safety is threatened, dial 999.
Work to break the stigma around DA. Create a work environment where people are able to disclose and feel that they will be believed. Prioritise people's well-being and encourage open discussion around domestic abuse. For example, share your experience and the knowledge you gain from this conference with your employees.
And lastly, we're going to ask you to take practical steps to support your managers and employees. So together with your managers and HR teams, create a workplace DA policy. Educate your workforce about domestic abuse. Create some time and space to listen to people's stories. And if people have been subjected to or are subject to domestic abuse, offer them flexible working. That can also include a change of work location, but essentially help them to access the specialist support that can make a real difference to their lives.
We've identified some organisations that can help and support you with your work regarding domestic abuse. Everyone's Business Advice Line, the Employers Initiative on Domestic Abuse, the National DA Helpline, the Kent Domestic Abuse Services website and the Bright Sky mobile app. We hope that you'll be able to join us for the event on the 1st of December at 10 o'clock, where Hestia will be talking about their advice line and explaining what information and help is available to businesses to develop policies and ways of working to support those employees experiencing domestic abuse.